Alright, welcome back. So in this video, we are going to start with something that a lot of you might have been waiting for, because this is the thing that actually adds according to me, the most interactivity to your JavaScript page, right? HTML page, which is events. So events, as the name suggests, would be something that, you would be doing that, okay, when this happens, I want this code to be executed. An example, that if this button is pressed, I want this code to be executed. I want this thing to change on the page. I want this thing to get styling on the page, right? So you could do all of that with the help of events, right? So what are events? If you try to define it formally, then it would be like, something that um, you would be adding an event to a button, let's say, and there will be some code on the back that would have that will be executed as soon as that event is triggered, right? That event could be anything. It could be the click of a button. It could be cut and copy of something, right? So anything could be an event, and you would just say that when that particular event is triggered, I want this thing to happen, right? So let's start with the code, and you'll get even better clarity of this, right? So I have this HTML file made right here, and this is the HTML that I have. First of all, this is inside of a JavaScript events folder which I've made named intro.html. All right. So now this is the HTML that I have. You could copy this quickly, or you could simply download this from the GitHub link, right? And now what I have here is I have simple h1, and I have some styles for a class special. You'll see what that is for later, right? And I have an h1, a button which says click me to do something, a paragraph which is counter, and then 0 inside of a span. Now you might be thinking the use of all of this, but believe me, you will get everything by the end of this video, right? So, and I have an empty JS file which I already have linked with my HTML file, right? So this is the structure that I have set up. You could set this up quickly. And now let's start with the events, right? So the first thing, that in the normal DOM, and first thing, events are part of DOM, right? You cannot have events without DOM. So in the DOM, we had the select, manipulate cycle, right? And similarly for the events, which are a part of the DOM. So hence it is evident that they will follow this cycle too, except the special, the broad concept of manipulate will be simply replaced by add event, right? So to add an event, you first have to select the element, right? So let's say I want to add something to this button, and I'll explain what I'm aiming for here, right? First, when I click this button, some styles should be applied to this particular h1, right? Which are these styles. That is why I have defined this class. So these styles should be applied. Text align should be center. Color should be salmon. Border should be this thing right here. And background color should be F7, F7, F7. So that should be applied to the, this h1. And what should happen down here is this should keep a track of how many times I've clicked my button, right? As soon as I click my button once, it should become 1, then 2, 3, so on. And right now you can see that nothing is happening, and that is because we simply have a button and there is no directions as to what this button needs to do, right? That is what we need to do by adding an event. So first of all, I'll select my, so how do you select? The selection is same as all the other selections that we've seen till now. I can do document dot query selector button. So this will select this button right here. All right. Yeah. So now the next thing is I want to add an event to this. Simple, right? So let's add event. All right. So first of all, the add event is done through a method. Is inside of the button object itself, right? In any object, you would have a method named add event listener, right? Let's write that down. So to access it inside the button object, we'll do button dot, and then this first recommendation right here, or you could type this out, which says add event listener with E and L capital. Note that, right? because this is camel case in JavaScript, of course. So I have to do add event listener, and now in here I'll give two arguments, right? So the first argument will be the event that I'm listening to. What do I mean by that? So if I go to the event reference on MDN, right? So event reference is giving me the most common categories of events, right? And what do they mean by that? I'll show you that with the most imaginable event, which is the click. So what the click will do is, as soon as you click on that particular thing, on, let's say if we are adding the event listener to the button, then as soon as you click on the button, something will be done, right? So first you have to specify what you're listening for. So if I do click here, so means I'm listening for a click on a button, right? What else could I do? I could listen for a double click by doing DBL click here. Then I would be listening for a double click on the button, right? And this is a pointing device button, is click device, right? Or I could be doing mouse enter, saying that a pointing device is moved onto the element that has the listener attached, meaning that as soon as I get on this button, the event will be triggered, right? So first you have to specify when the event should be triggered. So in here I'm saying that as soon as I click on the button, because we're adding button.eventListener, so then I want to do some code. Now what code do I want to do? That you have to give inside of this function, which is the second argument to the event listener, right? So the first thing, you'll note that I've simply written function, then parentheses, and then the these curly parentheses. So what's the reason behind that? That is because this is something known as a callback function. And callbacks are not just common to event listeners, especially right in the backend, you will have loads and loads and loads of callbacks. Callback is going to become a really, really common feature now, right? So what a callback is basically anything like, you would have this in a lot of places, saying that if something is done in this function, then execute this function. Basically a function inside of a function here mostly would be a callback, right? So we are saying that as soon as the click of the button is done, implement this callback function. So this will not have a name, implying that this can be used only inside this event listener, and there's no way you could use this function outside this event listener too, right? And if you had any arguments, you would take them here. Of course you don't. But now inside the callback function, I can simply do what I want to do. So first, before adding the complex things, I'll do alert button click, right? So now according to this code, as soon as my button is clicked, I should get an alert saying button click, right? So I'll go to my page, I refresh it, and now if I press this, I'm getting an alert saying button clicked. So now we have added the most simple event we could have added to a thing by giving an alert that okay, this was clicked, and an event is successfully added. And that is basically all the effort that you have to put in for adding an event. All the rest of the effort is basically writing the code inside it, which is not specific to events in any way, right? You could have anything. Like what we're going to do now is, if you remember, we wanted to apply some styles to this h1, which were defined inside this class. So what we are aiming to do is we are aiming to toggle a class on or off inside this button event listener, so that when we click this button, the class will be added if it is absent, and it will be removed if it is present, right? So what I have to do is I have to do h1 dot class list dot toggle, and I have to give the name of the class here session, right? But of course this won't work right now because we haven't selected the h1. So I'll do where h1 is equal to document, and to give you some variety, I'll do get element by tag name. Now there's one problem in this, that when you do get elements by tag name, this returns a list. So h1.classlist won't work. You will have to do h1 index 0.classlist.toggle, right? Now if I refresh the page, as soon as I press this, I see that this is getting added, and when I press, this is getting removed, and I can do that infinitely, right? So now you have set up your first event listener perfectly, right? This is what you would aim for. And that is the effort that you need to put in, right? The next thing that we need to do is we need to change this text right here from 0 to 1 to 2 and so on, right? So first of all, we need to have a variable inside of our JavaScript which will actually keep track of the number of times this has been clicked. So first I'll set this to 0, and inside the function I can add this by 1. So now whenever my event listener is triggered, this num variable will be increased by 1, right? So now what we are aiming to do is that this count after this colon on the counter, we should have that this num as the text, right? So first of all, we have to select this particular digit, right? And that is why I put the span around this. So I put the span around 0. So now what we can simply do is we can select the span on the page, right? And then we can change its text content. Let's do that. So I'll do var counter is equal to document dot query selector span. So what this will give me is this will give me this particular area of the h1 right here. All right. So what now I can do is one simple line left. I can do counter dot text content is equal to num. And now we can expect this to work. Why? Because initially num is 0. As soon as the event listener is triggered, num becomes 1 and the counter gets updated, and then so on. Each time the text content of the counter gets updated, and counter is referring to this thing right here, right? Alright, so now if I refresh my page and I do click me to do something, first of all this gets the style, and second this becomes 1. And then if I keep doing this, the style keeps getting toggled and the counter below keeps getting refreshed, right, to 1 more than the previous thing. So now we have clicked the button 59 times and the style is applied. We click it, this becomes 60 and the style is removed. This is what we're basically aiming for, and this is the way you would add an event listener, right? So now you could do various things with this. You could, double click here. So what will happen is if I do PBL click and I refresh the page, right? So now if I do a single click on this, nothing's happening. But if I do a double click, my event is getting triggered, right? And you could have anything inside this event, of course. So I'll try this one more thing. Let's say I try mouse enter. So a pointing device is moved onto the element that has the listener attached. So if I do mouse enter, and now if I refresh my page, I see that as soon as I move my mouse over this, the counter gets refreshed and the style gets applied. And I don't even have to press this, right? I just have to enter the button. And this is something that you could do for, a hover effect kind of a thing. Although hover is possible to just the CSS too, but if you wanted to trigger some code on a hover, then this is something you could do, right? Because you are entering, and as soon as you enter, there's some code being triggered, right? All right. So this was all about the events that you needed to know, and you could, in the future, if you need, you could pick any event out of here, and then simply just add that event and add a function here, right? And the one last thing that I want to show you is this, right? So imagine having multiple, multiple event listeners in which the same thing has to be done, right? Having 5 buttons which have to do the same thing. So of course, there's no use in writing the same code over and over again. So what you can do is you can add a function by the name of, let's say, event toggler. And I mean, this name could be anything, of course. This is just a function. And inside here, you could say event toggler. So now event toggler is seen as the callback to this particular event listener. And if I go back here, I should not expect anything to change, right? Everything is working still the same. So yeah, this was all about the event listener and basically all about the front-end JavaScript. So here we have finished everything that you needed to know in the front end, except the jQuery, which we'll spend like very less time on because that is something that you could get used to later too. But except from that, we have done everything in the front end. So now we'll make a good project, an interactive project, and after that we'll be done with the front end, and we can start with the back end, right? All right. So yeah, that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next.